Sorare recently announced their new scouting season, with the inaugural events happening throughout March 2022. In addition to daily market events, which will see them auction players from specific leagues and SO5 regions, Sorare introduced 5 special weekly contests that will take place between Gameweeks 250 and 254. Each week has different entry parameters and rewards, including the possibility to win unique cards with lineups entirely made up of limited cards. Before we jump into how SorareData makes it easy to identify players who could help you win these prizes, let's review the game weeks to see what we have to work with. The special events start in Game Week 250 with the Underdog 250, which allows all scarcities except common cards, and each player must have a maximum average score of 45 fantasy points over the last 5 game weeks. Game Week 251 is limited Underdogs, where only limited cards are allowed, and again a max average score of 45 over the last 5 game weeks. Game Week 252 brings us the Super Underdogs, where super rare and unique cards are the only ones allowed, and a max average score of 50 over the last 5 games. Game Week 253 brings us back to limited, with Limited Underdogs the sequel, where only limited cards are allowed, but a max average score of 50 over the last 5 games. And Rare Underdogs closes us out for Game Week 254, where only rare cards are allowed, and each player has a maximum average fantasy point score of 40 over their last 5 game weeks. So how can SorareData help you get ready for these special weekly contests? If you don't already have cards that qualify for the competitions, you can search for ones on either the auction or secondary markets using our live auctions and live offers tools. Each page has detailed filters that allow you to narrow down your searches for exactly the types of cards that work in the special weekly contests. For example, the Underdog 250 allows for all scarcities with a maximum fantasy point average of 45. Using the filters, we can refine our search by selecting the appropriate scarcities, positions, L5 limit, and game week. Given the significantly higher prices for super rares, let's exclude them from our query. In fact, many people could just select limited cards because they're the cheapest, but we should recognize that there are some players who have rare cards but not limiteds, which is a potential reason to keep the scarcity included. Now that we know how we can use the filters, let's set them up by selecting limited and rare for the scarcities, any position, L5 no greater than 45, cards that are currently the best price on the market, and those that play in Game Week 250. We can also sort them from best to worst L5 average. Our search then produces all of the relevant results and shows us the important information for each player, like their L5 and L15 averages, the current cost of the card, which is the floor price, the recent average price, and the player's matchup for Game Week 250. To simplify things even further, you can save your preset so that it can be used elsewhere, such as on our live auctions page. Just make sure you select that the players are playing during Game Week 250. Now that we're all set for Game Week 250, we can easily change the parameters to help us in the other competitions. Game Week 251 is restricted to only limited cards, but with the same L5 average, which means we could just load our Underdog 250 preset, remove rare from the scarcity filter, and adjust the game week to save a new preset. Super rares and uniques are required in Game Week 252, plus an L5 of 50, which again are easily changed in our filters and can be saved as a new query. Game Week 253 is similar to 251 in that only limited cards are allowed, so we can load our 251 query but change the L5 to 50 to satisfy that criteria. And finally, Gameweek 254 is only rare cards, but an L5 of 40. One very important thing to remember is that a player's fantasy point average after Gameweek 249 is likely to be very different after 250, 251, and so on. So there's a risk in buying players ahead of time in case they no longer qualify by the time the special weekly comes around. However, your presets are already saved for when you're ready to use them in the future. Another big benefit to saving your presets is that they're not only available on the SorareData website, but they're also on the newly updated mobile app. Just go to the markets section for either live auctions or live offers and use the filters to select the appropriate preset and game week. All the tools you need for scouting season can be found at SorareData.